Have you ever thought about writing a book, but you just haven't been able to pick up your pen and get started?
Are you a working professional but struggling to balance the workload of your career, family, obligations, and preparing for your financial future? If so, this podcast is for you. You've spent years learning your craft, and now it's time to focus on your financial future. This podcast will teach you what you need to retire wealthy and happy. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Retire Wealthy and Happy podcast. We created this podcast to provide financial tips and tricks to help you build up your passive income, and also provide methods that you can use to protect your wealth so that you can plan a better future for yourself and your family. We're grateful to have this podcast sponsored by Monument Real Estate Capital. Monument Real Estate Capital, helping you retire 10 years early through real estate investments. On today's episode, we're excited to have Julie Broad with us. A brief background about Julie: she has been a real estate investor since 2001. She is currently the president of a company called Book Launchers and has been since 2017. She's an entrepreneur, speaker, and Amazon best-selling author of several books, which we're going to talk about today. She was born and raised in Canada, and when she's not working, she enjoys CrossFit and playing poker. A brief overview of what we'll cover in today's episode: we're going to talk about why you should write a book. We're going to talk about the company Book Launchers and how they might be able to help you. And third, we're going to talk about her book, Self-Publish and Succeed.
Well, Julie, welcome to the Retire Wealthy, Happy podcast. We appreciate you taking some time for us today, and we look forward to getting to know you a little bit better. To start, can we get you to just take a few minutes? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in publishing books, as well as real estate for that matter.
Yeah, well, they actually are connected. And I had a full circle moment just days ago, because the reason I got into real estate was because of a single book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read it in 2001 and immediately was like, okay, I need to get my money working for me. And so I set off and bought 2 investment properties. And eventually that led to me starting a training and education company in real estate. And I became a full-time real estate investor with epically good timing in 2008. And which was an adventure, but I got really good at raising money from other people because the banks didn't want to give you money to buy property at that time. But it led me to start a newsletter and grow an audience, and little bit by bit, that led me to, the opportunity to potentially publish a book. And so I was in talks with Wiley. They actually approached me to begin with. And I told them, oh, yes, I've got a great idea. And they said, no, that's not a great idea. We don't want that one. But they wanted me. So they proposed another topic, and we built a proposal together, which is really unusual. And then they turned around and rejected me and said they didn't think I would sell enough books. So it was quite I was devastated. I kind of smile and laugh about it now because it was truly a gift. But at the moment, I couldn't understand why other people I knew were getting book deals. And they led me on for 3 months working on this proposal to then not give me a deal. But I went back to my original idea and I self-published. But being the kind of person I am, I wasn't going to just self-publish. I was going to do it better than if Wiley had given me a book deal, which set me down a path of learning everything I could about book marketing and book publishing and all the things. And I ended up launching the book to number 1 on Amazon. So number 1 in print books, ahead of Dan Brown, ahead of Game of Thrones. And I was in the top 100 print books for 45 days. And when Wiley asked me what my next book was going to be, I said, I'm fine, thank you.
You had your chance, right? You had your chance.
Yeah. And so that was kind of that. It wasn't like from there I launched Book Launchers, but it kind of opened my eyes to the potential and the beauty. And my investment company raised tons of capital as a result of that book. My training and education company doubled in size in a year after the book came out. And I saw the power of a book, and it didn't matter that it was self-published. Nobody cared who was the publisher. All they cared about was what the book was going to do for them. And so 4 years later, I dreamed up the company I wished I could have hired to help me with my books, and I launched Book Launchers. So that's kind of in a nutshell how real estate ties to books and how I am where I am today. But I actually got to meet Robert Kiyosaki just a few days ago, which is why I say I had a full circle moment. because he came by my booth. I was manning a book launcher's booth, and he came on by and he said, he's like, "Oh, let's talk about books." He says, "I know a few things about books." And he spent 5 minutes just talking to me, and I got to show him in one of my books where I mentioned him in his book. And yeah, it was fun.
I don't know if you realize this. I actually worked for Robert.
Oh, fun.
It was probably 2004 to 2006, 2007, something like that.
Yeah.
I was one of his mentors. He used to come into our office. We were a subsidiary company, and so I didn't actually work for him. I worked for a coaching company that had the contract to do all of his mentoring at the time. And at the time, he was just prolific writer. I still don't think he wrote all of the books himself. I think they were mostly ghostwritten. But you mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't think Ben and I interview a single person that's been successful that they don't mention that book. Right. And what I found when I was coaching, and this may be a little controversial, I don't know. I don't think a single person could pick up his book and figure out what to do to buy real estate.
No.
It's not there.
No.
But yet this thing has launched real estate careers of thousands of people over and over again. And I'm just curious, talk a little bit about what was so powerful about that book for you, and why you think it is that it leads people down a path that Robert didn't spell out at all in his book.
Yeah, it's funny because after that book, I've read like David Allen, and like I dove into like all the people who actually did talk about how to invest in real estate. But for me, it was the simple idea. My parents owned and ran a 20-room motel my entire life growing up. I grew up in a motel, and I watched them, run this business and work insanely hard most of the time for their money and their income. So they created a job for themselves. And so for me, that really resonated when I read it in the book, because they were business owners, but they didn't have freedom. And so it was kind of that concept of, I'm going to school to get a job, and I'm going to basically do the same thing my parents did. And so it was that kind of mental switch of, I need to get my money working for me, right? If I'm going to work hard for my money also needs to work hard for me. And for me, that was the simple thing. And I went through the list of things, which was stock investing. And I had actually done stock investing to pay for my first year of university. But I felt like I got lucky. I felt like gold went up at the right time, and, things just happened for me. I didn't really feel like I could repeat it. And then, I was going through the list, and I was like, real estate, well, I think I could do that. And so that's really, that was for me. I can't speak for other people, but it was just that mindset shift that was insanely powerful. And I think that's the power of story, right? Made up or not, which I personally think it's a made up story, even though I don't think he's ever admitted it. But I think it's entirely made up. But it doesn't matter, because it's the gift of the mindset shift that the story gave me.
Interesting. So I was sitting here thinking about Robert and real estate. Intrigued, you talked about gambling, or at least Ben had found that you're a gambler. And I'm wondering about the correlation between investing in the stock market and your penchant for gambling versus real estate, and how it's not. I think there's a little element of gambling, but I think the real estate is not near as much of a risk. How's that?
So it's funny, because I don't really see poker as gambling. I don't do anything else. You'll never find me at a slot machine. You'll never find me at any other table. But poker is kind of funny, because if you it kind of teaches you decision making, and it reinforces taking action. Because if you sit at a table long enough, it's going to cost you money. I think that's how life is. If you just sit there and do nothing, you're losing money. And you can make the right decision and still not get the outcome you want. That's life. That's poker. So there's an element of luck, but there's also, there's poker pros for a reason. If you make the right decision over and over and over again, statistically, you eventually are going to come out ahead. And so it is one of those things where I don't necessarily see it as gambling. It's kind of, similar to real estate. I think stock investing isn't gambling either, but the thing that you can't control in the stock market is you really know what's going on in those businesses. So, you can look at the charts, and you can statistically, kind of like poker, put yourself potentially with an edge, but I don't think you can ever control it. So I'd rather be the one owning the business personally.
I'm curious. Tell me a little bit about your first book. What was the subject? I'm assuming it had something to do with real estate that they didn't love. Tell me a little bit about the book, and why do you think they did that? The first publisher didn't really like the book.
Yeah, they said it was too general, and they'd done general real estate before. The book was called More Than Cash Flow: The Real Risks and Rewards of Profitable Real Estate Investing. And it sounds general, I guess, on the surface, but what I did that books hadn't done at that point was I explained how I ended up owning a property that became a crack house. I talked about how my property manager robbed rent money from me, like right under my nose, and how I missed it because I thought it was passive income and my property manager was taking care of me. But meanwhile, he raised the rent, didn't tell me he raised the rent, and kept the deposits the same on my property. So there was things like that. And people at the time were really big on get rich. And they're not going to tell you about all the things that can go wrong if they're trying to get you to get rich and buy their expensive program. So I was sharing like, hey, yeah, I did the yellow letter program and the police came to my house twice. And if anybody doesn't know what the yellow letter, it's like this thing, I think Ron LeGrand was the guy who proliferated this. And you send this letter that says, I want to buy your house en masse. And we did it. And I think it's also the difference between Canada and the States. But like people thought we were preying on their parents when they got these yellow letters, and we got reported to the police. So the police came to my house twice. And the second time they were like, look, we know you're not bad people. We know you're not doing anything wrong, but can you please just stop? Like, we're getting all these calls. So I told those stories. And I also told them, the things that went well, but it was all those kind of dramatic stories that people really enjoyed and appreciated. And then they didn't feel so alone. They were like, a lot of people feel like they're doing things wrong because they're getting these, tenants that I had a tenant pull a knife on another tenant, I had lots of great stories. I was meant to write a book.
Interesting that, and I've shared this before. I, out of college, started doing, I went right into property management. I did an internship. I worked up to the point, I think at one point I was the regional vice president of a publicly traded REIT. The number that I published is pretty close to accurate, is that I've been involved in about 80,000 multifamily units in my career. And the interesting thing from a property management standpoint is it doesn't matter whether they're in Beverly Hills or Huntington Beach, or whether they're in the barrio someplace, they all end up being crack houses at some point or other. So I jokingly tell people that I've spent my life chasing criminals out of apartment buildings. And the only difference between managing stuff in Beverly Hills versus someplace in the barrio somewhere is that the crack addicts in Beverly Hills probably have enough money to hire an attorney and fight you when you try to come back against them. So anyway, it's interesting. Property management takes an interesting turn. And I, to this day, I don't think there's truly something. Passive income is very, very hard to achieve. Even if you are asset managing like we are for someone else, we're still spending a lot of our time dealing with property managers and making sure that they are doing what they're supposed to. If you are investing in one of my portfolios or our portfolios, and you're not looking at your financials every quarter when we send them out or whatever it is, and calling up and asking a few questions, I say shame on you, because we've been sold this bill of goods that passive income exists, and we call it passive income, but I think you always have to have some sort of a control on your investments and know where they're at. So
yeah, I agree. Even with books, people think book royalties or the proceeds, if you self-publish, those are passive, but they deteriorate really fast if you stop doing things to sell your book and talk about it. So it is funny that a lot of things, I guess stocks, if you want dividends, that's passive. There's nothing to do. But I'd still read the financials, right? I'd still read the statements of the company and try and investigate what's going on. So yeah, it is funny. There really isn't passive income.
How long does it take you, do you think, to launch a book?
That depends on the author, really, because some people are good decision makers. They know what they want. They know their message. They know their audience. And so they can go through it faster than others. And it also depends where they come to us in the process, because some people come to us with an idea. Others come to us with some work that's been done or a first draft. But The fastest book is about 6 months, and that's rare. And most of the time we take about 9 to 15 months to launch a book.
Okay. The books that you're publishing, I'm assuming that when you're self-publishing, you're probably not printing them anymore, aren't they? Isn't that mostly some sort of a PDF or something along that line?
Print on demand. So we are printing them in nonfiction because that's all that we do. It's still the majority of books sell in print. Audiobooks are starting to, even out, especially if your audience is like a realtor or an entrepreneurial audience or a younger audience. Audiobooks are kind of going neck and neck with print books, and ebooks are the smallest part of the market for most of the nonfiction.
Okay. And those all, I don't know enough about. A partner of mine and I years ago decided that we were going to write a book on commercial real estate investing. We divided up the chapters and said, here, you write this one, I write this one. We got together and put his with mine. And I'm like, holy smokes, we are so pinnacle opposite in our writing style. It was going to take us 3 times as much to have somebody edit them so that they were cohesive as it would have been to just rewrite the whole thing. But anyway, writing a book is how much work is that for the average person?
Not as much work as it is to market and sell it.
Okay.
A lot of people think the writing is the hard part. And truly, it is hard. It takes emotional, intensive energy to write a great book. But some people can hammer a book down in 30 days. But it depends on how clear. Like I find the people who can write a book faster are speakers because they have been honing their message in front of audiences for quite some time. But you don't have to be the one that writes it either. Like what I would have suggested to you is to send your book to a writer and have the writer rewrite it in one voice, or interview you guys and capture it from there. So there's lots of ways to write a book, but the hard part is thinking through the concepts, understanding your audience, and really figuring out how you're going to have an impact on that audience with what you have to say.
Interesting that you said that. Literally the way, and I've spent a ton of time speaking, right? As a coach, as a mentor, I was on a public nationwide speaking tour for a while, talking about commercial investing and that type of thing. So I think I'm pretty comfortable speaking. And literally the way that I wrote this book is I took my tape recorder with me when I went jogging at night, and I would just push the button and go through and tell some of the stories that I used to tell when I was coaching and use those to draw analogies. Then I'd come back and throw some statistics or that type of thing that I couldn't remember in there. But like you said, where you've honed that story over and over and over again, it didn't take me a long time to write the book. The problem was all the, hey, quit pulling it, that came out in my book because of the way I wrote it. And I'm yelling at some car that just pulled out in front of me or something like that. Anyway, that's very interesting. The concept that storytellers or people who speak a lot, that it becomes very, very easy for them to tell their message. And we find that all the time. Ben and I go sit down and have lunch with people. And my other partner, Roger, used to say, oh, wait a minute, I've heard this story before. I can tell it better than he can now. So he'd go and tell my stories or whatever. So going forward, what do you think is the future of print books? You say these are print on demand. Is that the future? Is that where we're heading right now, or is it self-published PDFs that people are doing now?
People still want to hold that book in their hand. It is very, very interesting to me how many people will not, or they'll buy all formats so that they like to have the print book on their shelf. They like to have the ebook on their phone, or the ebook or the audiobook on their phone as well. I don't see print going away for quite some time because it is still so dominant, even though ebooks are substantially cheaper, right? A lot of ebooks get sold for 99 cents, $2.99, and people will still pay $14.99 for the print book. So I think the print book is not, especially in nonfiction, it's different in fiction. People that read, especially people who read a lot of fiction, they're not buying the print book. So for those books, you're almost already there. But as far as going ebook or PDF, as you say, but I think for nonfiction, I don't think I think we're quite a ways away from people not having physical books. But I do see audio really, in the last 2 years in particular, it's really taken off. And I think audio is dominating the ebook. And what you are seeing is, I think people who are listening to the audio are buying the ebook if they really like the audio. And I actually just did this myself. Dan Sullivan has a new book. It's awesome. 10x is easier than 2x. And I listened to, and I was like, this is so good. I need to have the ebook so I can actually like get some of the quotes out of the book. So I know I'm not alone in doing that.
If I turned the camera just a little bit, you'd see a great big shelf that has tons and tons of books. And I've read probably all of them I've read. But I actually prefer, especially at my age, I go out and walk for a couple hours at night and listen to an audio book, and that's the preferred way to do it. But I love to have the book up on my shelf so that when people come over to my office, they go, "Oh, wow, he's really well read, isn't he?" Even if I haven't picked him up.
A status symbol.
And they open them and they go crack.
This is brand new.
So talk a little bit about publishing and why it's so important and how that can benefit you. Getting your first book published, and maybe a little bit about what that did for you in getting your message out there, but why you think it's so important.
Yeah, there's a few things. So one thing that it does is almost everybody in an industry has the same credentials, right? And then they're competing on years of experience. So they're like, we've been doing this for 25 years. And the other company is like, well, our combined experience is 60. Well, when you write the book on the subject, like solving somebody's problem, you kind of erase all of that weird, like years of business competition, because now you're the author of the book. So it's a next level credential that kind of takes away from even the need for having some of the credentials in some spaces. So that's one reason why I really like it. But, if you have a business or a brand of any kind, to me, you're leaving money on the table not having it, because it's better than any marketing. Nobody throws books out, right? We donate them, we'll give them away, but it's very rare. I have pitched a few books in the trash. I've been like, this is so bad, it's not worthy. But it's very rare, right? You think about what you do with your books, and it's rare that people throw it out. So if you've written a good book, people are going to pass it along, or at the worst, they'll donate it or take it to a used bookstore and resell it. So your marketing, your brand, your message, your story, it lives on for a really long time in a book. And it builds your business. If you're a consultant, it tends to add a zero to your business, to your consulting fees. Speakers, same thing. And for me, I kind of already noted, but it was actually surprising to me, the first phone call I got. It kind of felt like somebody was calling and saying, "You want a free cruise?" Those spam calls. But somebody called me up and they said, "I just read your book and I have $250,000 and I want to invest with you." And I was kind of like.
Are you kidding me?
I'm like, did you read about the crack house? Like, did you skip that chapter? And I mean, we actually ended up buying that investor got us into our first commercial property, because up until that point I'd only done residential. And it was really interesting. And that happened several times where total strangers came to me wanting to invest. And then, like I said, my training and education company, my courses that previously would take till like the very last day to fill up, they were filling up well in advance. I raised the prices on all of them. And it was phenomenal, because people read it and they were like, "I need to work with you." And it got to the point where people be like shoving their credit card at you, and you're going, "Wait a minute, like, I don't think that you're the right fit for what we do," or vice versa. And it was very interesting. And I see that with our clients too, if they write a well-positioned book. That's the key though. You can't write a random book about something and think it's going to do, it's going to make me famous. Well, you have to write it with an audience in mind and have an impact and a message that's going to matter to that audience.
Very good. Ben?
Before we move on, Julia, I wanted to ask you, would you say at any point, or I guess at what point, does being an author become passive income? Does that question make sense? Does it ever get to that point?
I don't think it does, because when you stop, a lot of people call it their book baby, right? They call it their book baby, and kind of see why, it takes 9 months or even longer to get this baby into the world. But a lot of people don't realize that when they've put a book out there, they've signed up for life, kind of like when you have a kid, you've signed up for life. And if you stop promoting your book, it will stop selling. My More Than Cash Flow still sells. Inevitably, though, I'm still talking about it, right? Like we're here, I'm got a new book and we're talking about book launchers, but we're still talking about my original book. So it's still selling. And I say, well, I'm not promoting it, but then I really look at it and go, actually, I'm still talking about it. So that's why it's still selling. So if you stop talking about your book, it's going to stop selling. So it's not passive.
Interesting. Okay. So on our podcast, we talk a lot about different ways you can build up your passive income for retirement. And that's why I asked that question, because a lot of, at least me before this, I thought that at some point, if you're an author, you just have money rolling in, but it sounds like that's not the case.
No, I mean, where there's money there. And what's cool is the book is intellectual property. And so when you have intellectual property, there's a lot of ways that you can make money from it. You can license it to a foreign publisher. And this is where you can kind of get passive income, is because if you get a foreign rights agent, like a book like mine, More Than Cash Flow, it's for Canadian real estate investors. I mean, it sells in the States, but it's really, it's not going to get foreign rights deals. But if you have a topic that is interesting to people in other countries, like one of our authors wrote a book on autism, that's a topic that's hot in certain European countries right now. So foreign publishers might be interested in that. If you get a foreign rights deal and they do it, they're going to promote it, they're going to market it, you're going to get royalties. And that's really passive because they're going to do pretty much everything. And you probably don't speak the language. So there's really nothing you can do to contribute in any way. So there is opportunity there. Some movies or some books get licensed or sold for movies or television. Again, that kind of becomes passive because they really don't want you involved. You may or may not like that, but they really don't want you involved. And so you'll get some payment as those things happen, and that's passive. So to a degree, it is there, but I'm kind of the mindset that if you go into anything thinking passive, you're probably not going to put the effort into it that you should in order to maximize the opportunity and cover your butt.
Probably got to get pretty famous with your books before they'll make a movie out of it, right?
Not necessarily. We've had several authors. Depends. Like there's certain topics, right? We had a true crime author that probably could have done a lot of things with his book had he wanted to. He had a lot of really interesting opportunities come his way. We've had people be parts of documentaries. And then we've also had other people have interest. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but what do you call them? Mini-series about their life story. So I don't think you have to be famous per se, but you do have to have a really powerful story. And it helps if it's on trend with whatever Hollywood or, the movie production companies are kind of looking for. But you don't necessarily have to be famous. They'll make you famous, whether you like it or not.
That makes sense. Well, you got to have the good story to start, right?
Yeah.
So let's switch topics a little bit and talk about your company, Book Launchers. And maybe we've already asked this question a little bit, but do you want to talk more about how that company got started?
Yeah, it kind of came from the book, but then what I was doing was, so I was in real estate and my investment business partner was my husband, and who was my boyfriend when I started investing. And I kind of like looped him in. I was like, come on, like, let's do this just because I needed more capital. I'm like, hey, do you have any money? Like, so thankfully
you have a job and I don't have one. So, exactly. So can you sign on loans for me or something?
Pretty much. Anyway, thankfully he liked investing, and also thankfully we got married. So it all worked out. But yeah, it is kind of funny how I was like, so I got this idea. I know I'm going back to school, but you're going to have a job. Anyway, so when I launched, we were building real estate investments. We built that business together, and at some point, doing buying a house every month and kind of doing deals, it just kind of gets boring. And he was starting to pursue deals just for kicks. And I was kind of like, one fell through and I sat down and I was like, why are you doing this? And he said, well, what else am I going to do? And so then he got into acting. And that's kind of how we ended up in Los Angeles and moved to the US, was just because of him acting. But because he was getting into acting, I didn't have the guy that was running all the numbers, because he was a mortgage broker at one point. And he was my numbers guy. I did pretty much everything else, but he would run the numbers and do the financing on the deals, and did that for the education company too. So I started to go, I don't want to run this company without him. Didn't really want to find somebody to replace him. So I started dreaming up a new company. Plus we needed a visa to move to the States. So I was like, well, if I start a company and start it in the States, I can get a visa. You can kind of see there's definitely a gambler in me here. I'm definitely hearing it as I tell you guys this. But yeah, so I started Book Launchers as part of my visa to move to the States. It was the investor visa, and that's what I did. But I dreamed up a company that kind of fulfilled the needs that I thought were missing in the market. Because there's great editors, there's great writers, there's great PR people, but it was very hard to find anybody that was looking at the whole thing and basically building marketing into the whole process, which is what traditional publishers do. That's why I got rejected. They didn't think I was going to sell enough books. So I wanted to build a company that was doing the marketing at the end. So we pitch you for podcasts and live appearances and media and all those things, libraries, bookstores, book awards, Amazon ads, do all those things. And in order to be successful, we are setting you up from the very beginning, looking at where you want to go and what the marketing is going to be at the end. And we layer that marketing into the entire process. So I built that. That was really vital. And then the second piece was that I didn't like these companies that were charging $30,000, $50,000 up front for this book. I wanted to have like a contract or not even a contract. I wanted you to be able to cancel if something went wrong for you or for us. And I also wanted it to be a monthly option so that it was easier for businesses to kind of finance it and cash flow it. And so I set up a membership model, which nobody else has in this industry. And I layered marketing into the entire process. And you never have to leave us if you don't want to, because we're always going to keep marketing your book. And some of our clients have been with us since we launched in 2017.
That's awesome. So you guys are we'll call it a full package, a full service. Somebody comes to you with an idea, and we could start from the beginning and say, let's write this book, let's edit this book, let's technically publish this book and do all the marketing for it. Is there anything, generally speaking, that I missed in that, what you do?
No, I mean, that's the high level view of what we do. And marketing, the marketing gets planned throughout. So we plan your launch strategy. We're doing research, keyword category pricing research, market research, your audience research. We do your media prep, media training, media kits, speakers, one sheets. There's just so many pieces, but yeah, that's the essence of it. And it's one thing where people come to us because they are used to this a la carte model where they hire an editor, hire a cover designer. They're like, okay, we just want you to do editing. And we literally can't do that because we are not set up to just do editing. Because while you're going through editing, we're also doing your keyword category research. We're brainstorming your title. We're looking at your chapter titles. So yeah, you can't come to us for a la carte. You come to us if you want somebody to take care of it all for you.
That makes total sense. And previously you mentioned that your company focuses on nonfiction books, correct?
Yes.
And the next question I want to ask you is like, what else would help? Who would be a good client for your company? Like how do you pick that?
Yeah, it's people that have a bigger picture goal for their book. So somebody who wants to just write books and only write books. We've done a few of those. Like we've kind of done, like I said, we did a true crime and we've done some legacy projects. But our ideal client is that speaker, that consultant, that business owner, or somebody. We have a lot of clients who've left corporate and nobody knows how extraordinary they were in corporate, like the patents they created or, the company they built. And so now they want to write a book so that they can kind of transfer into a new career as a consultant or a speaker. And they write the book so that people actually learn about all the cool things they did when they were in corporate. So those kind of people are perfect because they're using the book to build their brand and they're not just interested in book sales. They're also interested in kind of the things that doing podcast interviews and speaking engagements and all of that marketing can do for you, because it's more fun if you're monetizing one activity in many ways.
Yep. Make it a lot simpler, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you this question, and we've talked about it a little bit already, but what challenges would you say people face when writing a book, and how does your company help them overcome those?
Yeah. I mean, they kind of come down. I mean, the list is long, but they really come down to kind of what I call the four monsters. And so they're all internal almost always, not knowing where to go and not knowing what to do is part of it for sure. But then if you hire a company like ours, we have an entire step-by-step process built. So that kind of erases that. But the fear of failure, the fear of success, imposter syndrome, those are really, really big things. Fear of failure, I'm missing one. Oh, fear of judgment. And those things rear their head. It's kind of like if you've ever read Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, he talks about the resistance. Really good book, really easy read. And he talks about the resistance and how those things that we know we're meant to do, but suddenly your kid gets sick or your tire on your car, you blow a tire on your car. like it's not actually those things happening. It's the resistance trying to stop you from your greatness. And I think that happens with a lot of authors, right? It's, it's things that seem legit, but at the end of the day, if you're truly committed to something, you'll find a way to get it done. And it's really interesting to kind of see how it rears its head. Fear of judgment is very real. I think a lot of people get held up. They don't tell the stories they should tell. They don't actually share the message they should share because they're afraid. And I can speak from personal experience. I had people that did not know, my coaching clients, my family didn't know about some of these horrific things I dealt with in my property. And I was really scared to share them, but I also kind of knew that if I didn't, this book wasn't going to be good enough. And so that's kind of what we help with, right? The coaches will coach people through that and really encourage them to go deep enough that the book will be good or great. We really try to go for greatness as much as possible, and then guide them through the process so that when these monsters pop up in whatever format, they're able to kind of navigate it. And, covers are the other place we see these monsters come up. People will go through 42 iterations of a cover only to arrive back at cover design number 2. That's not a bad design. That's your monsters.
So it sounds like you're coaching these people, support and coaching and making sure they get to the finish line.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have support, whatever that looks like for you. And also be aware that the support at home or the people who share the same last name as you, they aren't necessarily going to be the ones that give you the kind of support you need to get a book out there, at least a book that will be great. It varies, but we've seen a lot of good books go bad because somebody else is afraid. Their own monsters, right? They have their own monsters. And when you're about to do something great, their monsters can be problematic for you as well. So we do our best to try to navigate those situations too, but those get a little delicate at times.
Well, in other podcasts, we've talked about just success in general and how a lot of times when we're talking about success, there's the element of being on a team and having the right players in your court. And there could be people that are in your life that support you in this scenario, but that doesn't mean they have any knowledge or expertise about how to publish a book or that they're really setting you in the right direction, which is why bringing you and your team on could be really good helping there and making sure that
getting expert advice. I think in anything you do, done what you want to do and learning from them and then leaning on the other people in your life to kind of help clear the way for it.
Absolutely. Now, Julie, if somebody comes to you and either you think they're not a good fit or they decide they're not a good fit for your company, what else could they do to work towards launching their own book?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. Part of that is why I wrote Self-Publish and Succeed, so that there is a guide for all the pieces that you need and all the people you need to hire and what to look for. So that is one thing, especially if it's nonfiction. The book is a great place, and I refer a lot of people to the book. And then from there, it depends on, your goals with the book, but there's some great kind of places where even we hire editors from. Readsy, which is a website that has editors and designers. And then Urban Writers is another kind of marketplace where you can hire different people. So you become the general contractor. And so you have to hire and manage those people and kind of know what you're looking for, but you can save money. And for some people, that's one of the factors, or you can get a very particular, like a technical expert for a certain type of book. And so that's often what I kind of combined recommend is have the guide from the book and then hire the right people.
That makes sense. And I also wanted you to give a shout out to your YouTube channel here. Just tell us briefly what your YouTube channel is all about.
Yeah, it's booklaunchers.tv. And we have new videos every Tuesday and Friday. And it is all about writing, publishing, and marketing a book. So I have more than 500 videos on the channel now. And there's pretty much every question that you probably have about nonfiction book writing and publishing is answered. And if it's not, post it in a comment and I'll shoot a new video because I'm always looking for new ideas.
I watched a couple of those videos and I thought to myself, if anybody's trying to write a book, like she's giving away all the answers right here. So just for our listeners, if you want to write a book, go check out her YouTube channel. And as a reminder for our listeners, on today's episode, we're talking about why you should write a book. Julie mentioned like how that impacts your brand. We've also just talked about her company, Book Launchers, and how they could help you if you're looking for an expert team to be a all-in-one package with coaching and life coaching kind of added on top of that. Sorry, Julie, I'm just throwing that in there. And then we're also going to talk about her book, Self-Publish and Succeed. So Earl, let's take it over.
So as I'm sitting here, I'm curious if I decided right now I was going to write a book, and I told you I've done it, at least started. We didn't get it to publishing, but
just like a lot of other people, right, Earl?
I'm sure there's a lot of people that have a couple of books sitting on their computer somewhere that's where what they're at. If I came to you and said I want to start, what would that look like?
Yeah, I would first ask you what success looks like. So what's kind of your big picture goal for your book?
Okay. And then is there a procedure where you decide if I'm right for you? I'm sure that I would decide, we'd interview each other and find out if we were right for each other, assuming that we said, all right, this is something that we both think will be beneficial to us. Where would we go next? Would you help me design the book? Is there I'm assuming most of your clients probably pay you some money to get started. I'm assuming it's not all the money on the back end to do one. What's that look like?
Yeah, as I kind of touched on, we're a monthly membership. And so you would activate your membership. You can prepay. So if you want to prepay 6 months or a year, you can prepay and there's a slight discount, but you can still cancel at any time. There's no contract and it's all terms and conditions that kind of outline our membership. If you have a book that's written, we start with an assessment because we do have a standard of kind of where we want books to be. Again, because while you keep all rights and you keep all royalties and you're ultimately the CEO of your book, so you make all the final decisions, we are the ones that are out there pitching you to media and speaking and live appearances and podcasts. And so we've had it happen a couple times where we've sent a book to somebody and they've said, this is not book launcher standard. Like, what happened? And that's horrifying for us because we build these relationships with people and we want them to not even have to hesitate, be like, oh yes, book launchers books are always amazing. And so that's something that we really work hard to never hear that again. We never want to hear that again. So we put it through assessments and you don't want to hear that either, right? Like that's not something you would want to know about your book. So we do an assessment and we figure out, does it need more editing? Has it been positioned well enough? Like, does it have a strong enough hook and a clear enough audience for all of this? And assuming that is, we'll put it through the whole process. But you activate your monthly membership and then it's month to month. And at any time you cancel, or you can stay with us for as long as you want our marketing support. It's very flexible and everything belongs to you and everything's in your name.
You don't get a piece of the back end of the books or any of that kind of stuff?
No, we benefit by when your book is doing well and you're benefiting from the exposure that we're getting with the book marketing, you'll stay with us. And, we've seen that over and over again. And eventually most people stay with us, they stay with us and then they're like, hey, I've got another book. And so when we get these beautiful long-term relationships, I think we have 3 or 4 books that or 3 or 4 authors that are on their 3rd books with us now. And I think there's 8 that have done 2 with us. So we really enjoy those long relationships.
Does it turn out to be profitable for the most? I mean, the book that I was looking to write, I could have cared less if it made any money at all, right? It was just like you started out. I just want to get my name out there. I want to establish myself as an expert some way. And I'm assuming that a good share of that's what a good share of your clients are probably trying to do. But does it ultimately end up profitable for some of them?
For some, definitely not all, at least if you're just going straight off book sales, right? For some people, all they need is one client. And if you look at a realtor as an example, they need one commission and the book is paid for. And so it does vary on your industry, 1 speaking engagement or 2 speaking engagements, especially if they have like a book add-on, that can pay for it. So it really depends how you're getting your ROI, but off straight book sales, I don't know, because if somebody doesn't stay with us for years and years, we don't see their sales data. But I would venture probably half of our authors don't make it back on book sales alone, just because you're making $4 to $6 per book sold, even less if you're selling ebooks for 99 cents or $2.99. You have to sell thousands and thousands and thousands of books to recoup, what it costs to professionally publish a book, which is why it's so hard to get a traditional book deal, because they're doing the math and they have even tighter margins and they're looking to make it on mass volume.
And I'm just looking here, why not use a traditional publisher? I think you probably already answered that question, right? It's just they're looking at this and going, this one's probably not going to succeed, right? So if you're going the traditional route, they're only going to pick those books that are really going to light up the sales chart, so to speak.
That's part of it. The other thing is intellectual property, right? The publisher owns your intellectual property if you get a traditional deal. And this really became apparent with two of my friends that did get deals with Wiley. And one of them, he eventually left the real estate space, and Wiley republished his book under somebody else's name and gave him no credit for the book. And it was stunning to me because he also had two co-authors that got no credit, and the two co-authors were actually in real estate still. They just weren't on the contract with Wiley. But it was kind of one of those moments where I was like, how can they do that? And he said, it's morally gross, but legally it's their book. Like, they can completely do whatever they want with it. And then the other scenario that happened was a friend of mine got approached by a production house that wanted to produce a television show for HGTV from his book, but Wiley wouldn't negotiate with the production house. And so he had to buy his book back, which meant buying every copy that was in circulation in all the bookstores in order to actually film the pilot. And he flew down to Florida, filmed the pilot, and then HGTV decided not to take the show.
Wow.
But, I don't blame him. I would have done the same thing. I would have wanted to pursue the TV show to see what would happen too.
How difficult is it to market a book?
Oh, it takes trial and error, right? Because if there isn't one solution, there's not one answer to what's going to make a book sell. Having your own audience is enormous. Like, if the audience is a fit for what your book is about and your book can help them, that will sell a lot of books really, really quickly and easily. But getting new audiences, it sometimes takes a bit. We just had a client per book, and we pitch a set number of places every month. And usually we have 20 to 40% success, like a month of pitches. If we pitch 10 as an example, we would have 2 to 4 wins. But with her book, for 2 or 3 months, we just couldn't find an angle that people wanted to talk to her about. And then we finally, I think it was the 4th month, and we finally figured something out. And then I think they had almost 50% of her pitches that month got a win. So that tells you that you can't just try one thing. And a lot of people think they're looking for that magic bullet. So they try one thing and then like, this doesn't work. So you have to be persistent, and you have to be willing to try a lot of things. And then when you find something that works, just keep going, keep doing that over and over again until it stops working.
How difficult is it to get, say, and used to be Amazon was a bookstore. Today they're something completely different. But how difficult is it to get your book into a traditional bookstore where people go and look at it, or is that even a thing anymore?
Yeah, you can do it. It takes like a couple phone calls and a couple physical store visits to do it. The math sucks though, because what happens is, in order for a bookstore to buy it, unless you give it to them on consignment, so if you buy the book, give it to the store, and then they'll pay you after they sell it. But if you want to try to do bookstore distribution en masse, what happens is, not only do you have to set your discount rate, without going too crazy with math, but you have to set your discount rate to 55%. And that's all books sold then. Like, there's no ability to be like, only when Barnes and Noble buys this to put it on their shelf will we give 55%. All of the purchases, online, offline, doesn't matter. They're going to have that 55% discount. But even worse than that is when a return comes back to you, you're not just paying what you got paid. You have to pay what the bookstore paid plus what you got paid back. So where you might have made $6, the bookstore probably paid 10 or 11 for the book. And now you have to pay them 10 or 11 because the wholesaler took that, but now you have to cover it. And so it really stinks to do like mass bookstore distribution as a self-published author if, say, COVID hits and you have a bunch of stores that carry it and now they have nobody coming in and buying books and they return a whole bunch of books. You can get hit with a pretty big bill.
Wow. Ouch.
Just for our listeners, I was able to read part of Julie's book, Self-Publish and Succeed. And I wanted to mention that I really liked how it was structured. From the start, she talks about how you start writing, how you market the book, and how you become a bestseller. So if any of our listeners are wanting to write their own book, I would highly recommend checking out Julie's book, Self-Publish and Succeed, or possibly looking at her company, Book Launchers, because it sounds like, even from Earl's experience here, you might have a book in your head that never actually makes it to to the finish line. And if you're serious about doing it, those are some great resources, including her YouTube channel. So, Julie, I also wanted to ask you, you have, we talked about Self-Publish and Succeed. We talked about More Than Cash Flow. And I know you have at least one other book called The New Brand You. I got that right?
Yeah, congratulations, because you're one of the few that actually gets that title right.
It's a funny verbiage, but I like it.
Yeah.
Are those the 3 books? Do you have other books you've published?
No, but I have a new book coming out in October called Self-Promote and Succeed, which is a follow-up to Self-Publish and Succeed, helping you market the book. And so that'll be out in October of 2023.
That's awesome. Look for that in online and everything. So, Julie, before we get into our final questions, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else that you would like to tell our audience about publishing books or anything about your experience you feel would be valuable?
Well, I can say for Earl and everyone else that a book that doesn't get published never has an impact. So, all those books just sitting there, I would highly recommend bringing them to life because it's great legacy for you. I've had authors say they're not afraid of dying anymore, or they're happy they did this for their kids. But really, for the reader, the one reader that it can impact, it won't impact them on your computer.
Influence, that's very important. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Julie, we're going to jump into the final 4. This is 4 questions we have to ask everybody that comes onto our show. So the first question is, tell us, what is your favorite business book?
My new one now is 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan. I'm loving that book.
I've heard a lot of people talking about it, so I need to read that one. Julie, tell us, what brings you happiness?
Impact, helping others, always.
That's a great answer. Sounds like you're doing a lot of that with your company. Tell us or describe to us what your future retirement looks like.
I'm never retiring. I'll probably play poker more, but
she's going to be a full-time poker player, guys. Julie, one last question for you. What do you think is the best way to give back?
Well, conveniently, I think writing a book is a phenomenal way to give back.
Well, yeah, because it's a legacy they can live on even after you're gone, right? So that's a great point. Mm-hmm. Julie, tell us, where can our listeners find you online?
You mentioned it, booklaunchers.tv. That is my baby, YouTube. When you comment there, it is me that responds. Everywhere else on the internet that you find me, it's not me that responds. But on booklaunchers.tv, that's me. So head on over to the YouTube channel. We also have a resource for everyone, the 7 steps to write a book that will be set up to sell. And you can get that at booklaunchers.com/7 steps. It's the number 7 steps. And that will help you get started and give you all our other links too.
And we'll put all those links in our show notes for everybody to be able to access.
Julie, thanks so much again for taking a little bit of time to meet with us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting with you. I haven't sat down to rewrite my book. It's been probably 10 years that it's been sitting on my computer, and there's always other things. But you have literally inspired me. I may pull that out. I think for all of our audience out there that are thinking about why they should write a book, that I think that they're getting in touch with your company would help them to succeed with it, and encourage them to go ahead and look up the book. The Self-Publish and Succeed sounds like it's an incredible way for people who are thinking about that to get started. So we really, really appreciate your time with us today. To all of our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on the Retire Wealthy and Happy podcast. And we will see you all next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Hope you got value from this episode. And if you have a minute, then take the time to leave an honest written review for the podcast, because we take those reviews seriously and it'll help us serve you better on the next episodes. And most importantly, be sure to start taking action so you can control your financial future today.